Today, we're going to look at another key integration pattern, another key concept that is very useful for your ESB, your Enterprise Service Bus, and that is the convoy pattern, or more precisely, your sequential convoy pattern. We can talk about parallel convoys another time. So generally, the idea of a convoy pattern is that if you've got a data source and you've got a data set that is quite large, what you can do is, if it's too large to send in one go, you can split that into pieces and just send chunks over the wire. And then at your target, what you do is you take all those chunks and you reassemble them. And so what happens is generally that the first item in that needs to say, hey, I'm a convoy of data. And then your last one often might say, I'm the last message. But sometimes you just wait for a certain amount of time and then just assume you've got the last one. Sometimes you find a piece of data and you just assume that's the first one. But the point being that if you can split your source data set into chunks, reassemble them at the target, you can have that data set reassembled, and you've only had to transmit small chunks that are capable of being transmitted more easily, because things like a web request, HTTP, they don't like humongous chunks of data. Sometimes you might be putting things over as some sort kind of broker queue. They don't like huge chunks of data, but if you take a big data set, break it down, you can actually use a convoy to assemble that. Now, okay, we've talked about large data sets, so when might you use this? So if you've got a really large file, break it down into small pieces, send those. That's kind of an obvious one. But some of the ones that are maybe less obvious are actually, these days we do a lot of integration with APIs. So if you go to a REST API, do a search on it, you might only get the first 10 records, and then you've got to press next to get the next 10, and next 10, next 10. That API pagination is actually a form of convoy. And if you want to get the full data set, you've got to then assemble all those pages. So API pagination is a form of convoy. But then there's also time-based things. So let's say, for example, you've got a system that every hour it writes out a transaction log. And then at the end of the day, you want to say, well, what's happened in this day? Well, actually, you're putting together a bunch of transactions hour by hour into, here's my data set for the day. So again, those time-based things can also fit this pattern very well. It's easy to implement, but we'll go into the details of that another time. But just remember, big data set in little chunks, transmit, that's your sequential convoy.